in the Fringe. I think for us, there's a real sense that when we look at the life of Christ, there's a challenge for us. You can see his life as a story, but it's to try and walk in his footsteps, or to try and live out that story for yourself, and that becomes a play, a play about your own life. And the exciting thing is the next chapter is still to be written.
Faith at the Fringe, a Sanctuary First podcast series. Uncovering God in the creative arts. At the biggest international arts festival in the world, Sanctuary First stops to ask, where does faith and art meet?
Welcome to Faith at the Fringe, a Sanctuary First podcast that seeks to engage with creatives and musicians and artists who have come to the Edinburgh Fringe Festival. Joining in the podcast today is my colleague, Pete Sutton, and together we're going to be talking a little bit about what the people we've been interviewing and how we feel these podcasts have turned out.
Well, even before we do that, Albert, for me as a minister here, it's just so wonderful having the studio in the church in this beautiful room. And I think this room's played a big part in all the podcasts as well. I think everyone who's been in here has been inspired by the setting, having this story of St. Cuthbert behind us. And in many ways, he was a bit of a fringe player himself, you might say. All his engagement with animals and miracles, and the story of his life would make maybe for a great Fringe production next year. And that's my challenge, I think. Can I put together the Cuthbert story for the Fringe?
Well, that'd be an interesting one, wouldn't it? Absolutely. Yeah, we've been thinking about different themes that have been coming through the Fringe and the people who've turned up to engage with us. We had the mystery plays reimagined, which again was an interesting kind of conversation with how important the mystery plays were trying to connect with people in the Middle Ages to try and understand what faith is about. And so that was an interesting conversation with the group, a Green Shoots, a new theatre group that had been set up to try and explore faith through the mystery plays.
And I think alongside that, I found it fascinating, particularly when we had the street pastors here as well, because in many ways they were supporting the Fringe in a practical way, but at the same time it was very faith-based. And you might remember chatting with John Kirk and sharing with us some of the stories about how he as an elder here at St. Cuthbert's was able to practically put his faith into practice out on the streets, supporting the many people who would find themselves on the pavements during the Fringe in the early hours of the morning. So I think that was nice, seeing the support that's behind what goes on at the Fringe, which is huge, I think.
Yeah, and I think the challenge from them was that they were actually going to be looking at people coming out of Fringe venues, but considering and thinking, where is the church? Where is the witness of the Christian community in the Fringe, apart from street pastors? Is there a place for Christians to be actively involved in the arts without trying to proselytize people, but actually involved in the arts to get people to start thinking more about what faith is all about?
Yeah. And I think you're quite right about how do the churches engage, because here at St. Cuthbert's we are actually a Fringe venue, and we have beautiful plays. We had a Madame Butterfly, the opera, staged here at the start of the Fringe. We've gone to the some beautiful Scottish folk music that's been played here as well. We've had some comedy acts here, and we conclude with Scottish Sinfonia, because this church is actually the musical home for Scottish Sinfonia, and they have one of their annual concerts as part of the Edinburgh Festival, and that's coming up this weekend. So, as well as it being a really intensive 3 weeks, I think it's also important to remember that Edinburgh continues to deliver this throughout the year at various levels as well. And for the churches, as we both know, we are every Sunday operations, not just 3 summer That's 3 summer weekends.
And I believe you also had a podcast with one of the new Glasgow boys.
I did. And Adrian Wisniewski, who is just prolific in what he does. He's not just a painter, he's also a poet. He's written plays. He deals in tapestry and various different mediums. He was sitting where I was sitting, and the lovely thing is I knew that right behind him as he spoke, one wall through in that direction is his stunning painting of Lake Tekapo, and he shared with us, particularly about having work within a sacred setting, and I think that's important. And I think anyone who comes into our sacred settings, whatever their beliefs or none, I think often their breath is taken away just by a sense of the awe and wonder that they encounter in Edinburgh at this time of year.
Yeah. So, and there is a sense of wonder and awe, and in some of the plays that we've been looking at. And we had the Searchlight Theatre Company in, and they were doing C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, which takes us into the area of wonder and awe about, life itself and the struggle in the Christian life between good and bad. And very well produced and very well and acted out, and that was along in Charlotte Chapel. So they were using that, again, picking up a story, a book that written by C.S. Lewis, then putting it on play and getting people to interact with it. And of course, it's such a famous book that whether you've got faith or no faith, people do come to see, they'll engage with C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters, and were delighted to come and think they were getting good audiences at their performance for C.S. Lewis's Screwtape Letters.
I think the word you mentioned there, struggle, is important, because I think people often think festival time must just be a happy time for everybody, but a lot of people are struggling at the moment out there. And for us as a venue, we also host 2 weekly meals where we serve our homeless guests here at St. Cuthbert, and we'll always prioritize their 2 evenings without taking on an extra booking. And I think that's important as well, that a good thing about Edinburgh is you don't shove to the sidelines, those who might be, struggling a bit just to accommodate, maybe more glitzy performances. I think it's quite earthy what goes on here in the festival, and I think a lot of our podcasts have reflected that earthiness this year, which has been very encouraging, I think.
Well, I think what is encouraging when you talk about St. Cuthbert's is how welcoming your staff are to people. I've noticed from the sidelines that there's a generosity as people come in looking to see what's in the church, and the church is open as a place where people can come in the busyness of the festival to maybe just sit in quiet and reflect. And again, there's just that sense of I get that impression that just when you come in, you're welcomed.
Well, that's very beautiful that you should share that, and it'll be my privilege to share that with them when I see them later. So thank you for that.
But it's such an important thing, that outsiders, people, you can see guests, you can see tourists coming and being welcomed and feeling that they've been given information, and also sometimes getting the use of the facilities, which they're looking for as well.
And free facilities as well, if I may say so.
Of course, then we also had Chariots of Fire, or it's called Chariots, which is the story of Eric Liddell. And again, that was a great podcast and great interaction with Michael, who is the main lead in that particular story. So that was a good one. That was a good podcast.
And also, I think the good thing about that is, whilst that was going on, the World Athletics Championships are going on for real over in Budapest at the moment as well. And I think, the whole of the Liddell story, and it wasn't just on St. Andrew's Beach. His life went all the way over to China as well. But as we both know, holding fast to his faith throughout. And I think, as you probably know too, there's the Eric Liddell Centre just up the road in Edinburgh, and he's very much, I think, part of the life of Edinburgh even today for many people.
And our last, if we can maybe round up with our last podcast today, was Oggy Oggy, which again is Stephen Callaghan.
Oi.
Here, it's Stephen Callaghan, who again is a lovely podcast in which he shares a little bit about his faith journey as an actor and getting drawing in to begin to work for the Archdiocese of Glasgow. But the challenge, just when he was about to maybe be offered a secular play, but a professional play, but as he looked at it, he felt as a Christian he couldn't be part of it, and he stepped back from that, and then was looking for a job, and then found he was offered a job by the Glasgow Archdiocese to set up a theatre company. So again, it was someone who was true to his principles, but not knowing where to go, and then finding that there was a way ahead for him, just like Little.
Yeah, it's nice, isn't it, when you see people for real mirroring the people who are being reflected in the plays and the performances in the Fringe. I think for us, there's a real sense that when we look at the life of Christ, there's a challenge for us. You can see his life as a story, but it's to try and walk in his footsteps, or to try and live out that story for yourself. And that becomes a play, a play about your own life. And the exciting thing is the next chapter is still to be written.
Well, that's a lovely link to conclude the Augie story, because it's really about this. The first part of the story is the play is about Augustine and his conversion, and the implication is to say, if God can take someone like Augustine and turn him into a saint, he can do it for anyone. And it is bringing the Christian faith, right into the 21st century, and saying this gospel of Christ is something that we can engage with, because there is a power beyond us that comes to us through the presence of the Spirit to help us make decisions, to help us do the right thing, to help us walk the right way. And I think engaging with the arts this year has allowed us to once again be challenged to see what it is to be a Christian in the 21st century.
And I think exactly what we're doing here as well. You talk about the 21st century, the way these podcasts are going out on social media, the way that the message is now going out in so many new ways that we wouldn't have imagined, even literally 10 years ago. Yeah. I mean, that's so exciting in itself. And I think the work that you and your team do is just quite outstanding. So a big thank you, Albert, for everything that you do too.
Well, thank you for these compliments, and thank you to you, the listeners, who have been part of these podcasts. Can I encourage you to spread them around, encourage people to look at them, because there's lots of really interesting conversations that have taken place over the last 2 weeks. So until next time, God bless.